Now, Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, WMAL. Now on 105.9 FM.
7:37 on the Morning Majority. Brian Neiman and Mary Catherine Ham here in Washington. Brian Wilson off gallivanting in Florida for some reason.
There will be shrimp today.
All right, we've got Dylan Ratigan of MSNBC to talk to. He's got a new book out called Greedy Bastards. You know, how's it going, Dylan?
Oh, it's going fantastic.
Hey,
it could be better.
I have to say that I watch a show sometimes, and I'm with you like halfway through the argument. I'm like, yeah, those things are wrong, and those things are wrong, and then I totally disagree with you about the remedies. What is the...
That's why it's good we're talking to each other. Let's sort it out. Tell me the thing that you think you agree with me the most, but disagree with me the most on the remedy.
Well, I agree with you about the money in politics and the corrupting influence it can have, and the sort of corporatism in general, and how people are always just pulling strings for different interest groups. With you on that. I'm not sure that increased regulation is going to solve the problem. But tell me the premise of Greedy Bastards, and we can get into it.
Well, hold on a second. You put words in my mouth. I never call for increased regulation. I'm calling explicitly for a 28th constitutional amendment that says corporations are not people and money is not speech. If you think that that's increased regulation, well, then we would disagree. But I'm not talking about some long list of rules like Dodd-Frank.
Right.
For instance, with banking, I would make one regulation. You have to have your own money.
So it would have to be an individual giving money to a politician or for a specific cause?
For my money, I look at myself as someone who can observe the obvious problem. Mm-hmm. I think it would be arrogant for me to suggest that I can get to the finite detail of the ultimate solution. But we all know right now that we have had Republicans say for years that all the money has to be transparent. If it's going to be in politics, the money has to be transparent. And we've listened to the Democrats say, oh, it's got to be regulated, it's got to be regulated. Well, right now we have non-transparent, unregulated money, okay? So we can argue all day about what it's going to look like up the value chain. What I'm suggesting is that we start at the bottom with a piece of transparency legislation that should be passed this week in our Congress to end the absurdity of the blind super PACs, and from there embark upon the issue of corporation or corporate personhood and whether, in fact, money is speech.
All right, but are we here to this point where we are today, where we don't have any money, where we're broke and we're borrowing money from China on a regular basis, and we can't?
Although we actually, we don't. Most of our money is coming from ourselves. Very little of our money comes from China.
Okay, but you would agree with me that
that's a fear-mongering tactic. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of our money comes from either our own tax collections or is being printed at the Federal Reserve.
Okay, printed from the Federal Reserve, but people who are buying our bonds, our debt, also coming from overseas. Not necessarily China, but Japan also obviously has a lot of.
But the vast majority of the debt is being purchased by our own banks, who we're giving money to that we're inventing at the Federal Reserve.
Okay, and it's
screwed up. Listen, I'm not suggesting that it's not screwed up. I'm just saying that the way it's screwed up is different than you might think.
Okay, that's. But my point is that are we at the point now because of corporations giving money, or because they're in bed with these politicians, or is it because the politicians have promised so much to all of us and don't balance the books like everybody else has to do on a regular basis?
Well, I think it's a combination of the above, but at the end of the day, we're stuck in this industrial era fantasy that either more taxes or more austerity is going to solve our problems, when neither of those will be adequate to solve our problems. It's only when we recognize that when you're facing hundreds of trillions of dollars in the swaps market, tens of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities in the government, that an actual global debt restructuring, debt cancellation, a new Marshall Plan will be the only solution to this problem, along with modern resource allocation modeled after people like William Bratton or obviously Dr. Brenner in New Jersey with hot spotting. This whole concept of blanket allocations of money based on some insane premise of quality that doesn't exist.
Well, let me ask, do you think that there will be a day of reckoning where the whole system will collapse then? I mean, have we just put off the inevitable from 2008?
How this will happen, how it will happen, I don't know. Could there be a day of reckoning? You betcha. Could we decide to own up to the mathematics that exist themselves and convene a meeting where we begin the process of a new Marshall Plan with somebody like the Committee for Economic Development and Andrew Liveris and all these people that are involved with so some of the advocacy in Washington, D.C. that wrote the original Marshall Plan. Do we want to be honest about the corrupt nature of the credit derivatives that are run at like the dark ages off of an exchange, purely for the profit and benefit of Wall Street, and so that those contributions continue to flow to both political parties? I mean, these are the things that will be resolved in our lifetime. It's one of those things where how they will be resolved, and our how right now is embarrassingly bad as a country, the way we solve problems as a country right now. Forget what the solutions are.
Dylan, I want to
get technique of problem solving with each other is our greatest national security risk.
I want you to weigh in on a couple of things that I see going on with the Obama administration. Number one, on one hand, you have the Obama administration making big investments in Solyndra and other green companies, and many of them are starting to fail. Solyndra and a whole list of others have failed and gone belly up. The other side of that equation is you have a delay in place now on the pipeline, the XL pipeline, Keystone pipeline, that many people think would, A, number one, create jobs, number two, give us a more reliable source of oil. What do you think about those two things that you see right now happening in the Obama administration?
Well, the most frustrating thing about the energy debate in general is that we are always lost in what I see as a doomed fuel sourcing debate where we're forced to fight with each other about whether we should use natural gas or oil or solar or wind. Meanwhile, as a nation state, we are by far the most wasteful in the history of the world. The only fuel that will save us right now will be massive efficiency upgrades. And the fact that both political parties have us stuck in the 1950s with an Eisenhower-era stationary power generation efficiency ratio, an Eisenhower-era power grid dissipation rate that is embarrassingly bad. 20% of the fuel that is in a traditional automobile on the street right now actually goes to moving tires over the ground. The rest is lost at idle or through heat dissipation over the course of the running of that engine. Meanwhile, Japan's at 90% efficiency. We're at 34% on stationary power. Germany's at 80%. I think the fact that we all get off on fighting with each other about what the fuel source should be, like we know, prevents us from actually forcing the efficiency upgrades in commercial and residential real estate, and along with residential or private overland transportation, and then ultimately commercial transportation, all of which are in desperate need of massive efficiency upgrades, which could only be accomplished by restoring the actual price integrity of to hydrocarbons, especially by assigning a national gas tax of 5 or 10% as soon as possible, so that the free market will naturally force the transition away from hydrocarbons, which are actually costing, if you believe the Milken Institute, and I do, around $14 a gallon for gas, not $4. And people cry free market, but they like the free market that they rig by paying off our government to make sure we don't make any changes. It's absurd.
All right, we'll leave it there. Dylan, good to have you on. Thanks very much, and good luck with the book.